Welcome back to Unwritten Stories of Significance. You know why I say welcome back? Because Gotti returns. Part 2 of this amazing book about Gotti Picart. In my first episode here, I have returning Richard Picart. Richard is a creative director. He did all the designs. He did everything to amplify the message of his mother's story. And behind it, his mission within the curriculum and the representation of Afro-Caribbean within literature within the schools. Mm-hmm. With no further ado, I'd love to introduce to you Richard Picart. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Joy.
How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome, hon. I love that smile. So I must have hit home. I must have hit home when I was introducing you.
It's I'm a bashful person, so it's sometimes makes me blush. If a black man can blush, I'm blushing.
Okay, we got humor. I love it. It's the way to start a show. No, honey, I love that you smiled because it made me feel comfortable because this story is so inspiring. It's so empowering. It captures many, many levels of conversation. So let's delve into this because I don't want to take an ounce away from it. Thank you for returning, my love. We left off on our last episode with you on how you were so, how would I say, driven to make sure that your mother's legacy is not just a story, but it's a legacy of representation of Afro-Caribbean, as I said, of culture, competence that we have to understand. So if you can embrace upon that more on why you want this story, not only to be, I know I'm repeating myself, but legacy, but more to what you want it to be, why you do what you do.
In terms of the curriculum, the curriculum plays an important role that the Ministry of Education has identified. The Ministry of Education here in the province of Ontario is making a valiant effort to upgrade, change, and in some cases replace the materials that they have so that they have a much more representative nature and tone of the population of the students and the greater population of Ontario and ultimately Canada. So cultural pedagogy, the telling of authentic stories, the ability for students to see themselves and see their community in the materials that they're studying, as well as the opportunity for them to learn about other cultures are the key reasons why this learning resource lands well with the decision makers, the educators, the teachers, and the administrators within the school system. And as you indicated, the three pillars that we stand on is the fact that representation, people can see themselves. Allowing students and teachers in many cases to improve their cultural competency. So discouraging discomfort and amplifying curiosity around race, around culture, around ethnicity, and just the greater discussion about diversity and where it's most appropriate, where inequity thrives and how to remove that so that we all have the same outcome, right? Equity is about pursuing identifying disproportionate outcomes and pursuing that gap and closing that gap so we all have the same outcome. And that outcome can be pursued when we understand each other. We understand our histories, we understand where we come from, because now the playing field starts to level culturally and people understand it. And then they apply critical thinking, right, about issues of power, of identity, of representation, and start thinking about the world around them and not just them in the world.
That's right. So well said. My God, so well said. Listening back, putting this segment together here, and I replayed the amazing interview that you did with your brother there, author Robert Picart. You said Jamaica is more than patty and jerk chicken.
Sure.
And I had to say that because that resonated with me. And the reason why you said that is why. Why did you say that? Because that's a powerful statement and it's so, so true. So if you can touch upon that.
Well, Jamaica is this little island in the Caribbean is a standard for so many cultures, not just in the greater Afro-Caribbean community, but even just around the world. You know, one of the popular taglines from Jamaica is "Jamaica to the world," and its influence around the world is without question. But the one thing that it's important to add to the richness of Bob Marley and the foods and so forth is that Jamaica has a backstory that goes past the 60s, 50s, and 60s, right? There's a story that goes all the way back, hundreds of years, but more specifically within the 20th century, that talks about how we have, as a people, grown out of the scourge of slavery and have been able to move into a space where, although still duly influenced by colonialism, Jamaicans are on the move. We're creating our pillars of industry, trading and agriculture. We're traveling and moving to the UK. We're discovering the world. I just read about a Jamaican who came here to Canada in 1912, 1918, 1912. So it's just so hard to imagine. That's even before Gotti was born, that there are Jamaicans in Canada doing good work. And so talking about that part of it, talking about the challenge of the island, and also raising up and underscoring the things that have been also part of the Jamaican character, which is the pursuit of education, integrity, the love of family and the importance of the family unit, and also the curiosity about the world around them. You know, Jamaicans have no problem taking up their bag, as we would say, and moving to places to discover other parts of the world. And we started off talking about Bob Marley. You know, Bob Marley was known for going to other countries with his locks swinging and his guitar strapped to his back, singing music in this strange dialect called patois, but yet impacting the world with this message of peace. And this message of love and the desire to see us come together. So being able to at least shine a light on what the world was like in a post-World War II context, educating readers about the fact that Jamaica sent soldiers to fight in World War II, that we contributed with blood and tears and limbs, in some cases, to the efforts that the world was involved in. And also too, to raise a highlight to the fact that Jamaicans have participated in politics, have contributed to the development of other worlds. I'll share a fun fact with you that Sir John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, was married to a Jamaican woman.
Wow.
And so, Sir John A. Macdonald was married to a Jamaican woman. And so,
wow, I didn't believe that.
Right. And so these are the kind of the curious facts that get hidden when we don't go beyond the pop culture of Jamaica and we kind of stay in the comfort of today's conversation. When we go past that, we start to realize that the influence of the people, both in culture, in intellect, in invention, and so forth, has been longstanding here, and it is a story that's worthy to be told.
Well, well said again, as always, Richard, well said.
Mm-hmm.
Within the podcast that was put together by your brother with your mother doing the narration of it was incredible. Mm-hmm. She touched upon, when she was talking about her 9 siblings, he asked her about the 9 siblings. There was an uncle of yours, her brother, that served in the war.
Yes.
And that was touching.
Yes.
And she was talking and she was going on. So you can show that the history of it needs to know, and the culture for our youth to see the importance of knowing from it, and that was really, really touching.
Yes, it's one of the things that comes up is that when you think of the Caribbean and more specifically Jamaica in that time, there is risk that people may see Jamaica as just this third world country that's constantly having its hand out. And yes, certainly Jamaica has its economic pressures. That's no different than many countries around the world. But equally so, should be noted that Jamaica has contributed to the world stage, not just in culture, but also participating in difficult things where they send their young men and their young women to war to fight causes greater than them. This is World War II, where people are fighting each other in Europe. Here we are, we have a little island where we can, where we have to, take a mickle and make a muckle out of it, as our grandparents would say. And yet we're still sending our best and our brightest overseas to fight in wars and also to get educated and to do amazing things. So it's just to keep it in a positive light, it's just important for Canadians who watch this show and may embrace the book and maybe even have their families embrace the study in their local school, understand that Jamaica and other islands and parts of the Afro-Caribbean diaspora have backstories. And this is where our people come from when they land here in the 70s during the Windrush era. When they're coming over, our parents and our grandparents are landing here and making a way and making life. They come from somewhere, and that somewhere is part of the story. It doesn't just start when they get their permanent residency card here in Canada.
We only have 1.5 minutes left. 1.5 minutes. Okay, Richard, here we go. Why is it important, before we go to break, the backstory? Why? Why is it so important?
Because it's important because we don't want to risk that backstory being unacknowledged and excluded from the total framework of what people understand about Black people in Canada, and more specifically, people from the Caribbean. Our story is not just defined by the opportunity that Canada provides for us as people of Jamaican descent. Our story has started dozens, decades, perhaps hundreds of years earlier. And as I indicated earlier, we have been in seats of tremendous influence, including sitting at the right hand of the first Prime Minister of Canada. And so that is an opportunity for people who kind of look down their nose at Jamaicans and maybe hear the patois in the local patty shop and say, no, these are not just people who are only good for a little reggae, a joke, and some jerk chicken. This is a group of people who are influential, who continue to be influential, and continue to impact the Canadian society and have done so for many years.
And on that note, we'll be right back with Richard Picart. Welcome back to Unwritten Stories of Significance. Episode, oh my God, what is it? Episode part 2 of this amazing story. And we're bringing back Richard Picart. Richard, that segment, oh my gosh, as I said off camera, and I'm going to say it on camera, if I was in school, I would have gone further. I swear to God, because the way you deliver your content, I want to say content, but the way you talk is so engaging. It was so powerful, just speaking from the heart.
Our mother told stories. She told us stories, and she's an animated person, and she's actually quite funny. But when she would tell us stories about Jamaica, and some of it you heard in the podcast,
yes.
She tells it in a way that is quite colorful and has the tension in it that's needed to keep you listening. And so, you listen to that long enough, you pick up a few things along the way.
Yeah, but yes, and I did with the podcast, especially when your brother asked her or saying, and did we both have to work hard? And then she said, work hard. It was just the accent that came out. It was just beautiful. But anyway, yeah. This is you, hon. Okay, I want to quote something. And I went back and I listened to the show, an amazing first show that you did with your brother, Richard. And I'm going to quote something, correct me if I'm wrong here. Before you come to a tapestry, there are spools of thread. And that was, okay, can you build upon that? Because you said more, but I want you to share that with the audience here, the listeners, the viewers.
Sure. So for this audience here that's listening to this episode, the tapestry that I'm referring to is Canada. And this wonderful cloth of our culture and our civilization and the richness that we see from Victoria to St. John's is made up of threads. And these threads represent the individual stories and the individual communities that have come to Canada. Unless you have an Indigenous background, native to Canada, your people came from somewhere.
That's right.
And so that this, I don't want to use the word melting pot, because a melting pot kind of gives the idea that we lose our identity, become one identity, but I would like to use the word tapestry, where we maintain our integrity as a thread within Canada, but when you step back from it, you see the glorious fabric of who we are. And the one thing that I will say, staying with the tapestry metaphor, is that when you pull a sheet onto yourself or a quilt onto yourself, it's not one thread, it's the benefit of the collection moving in unison. And that's how I like to see, or envision rather, our glorious country as it relates to immigration, as it relates to migration, as it relates to, in some ways, even assimilation. You know, when you come here, who do you become? And what are the contributions that you can make to the fabric? And how do we help the next person ahead of us and the next person, you know, behind us? We are all benefactors of that. I listened to the more recent news, Joy, where Canada is making some important decisions around immigration and creating opportunities for people. And you hear in the corners, saying, well, why are they doing that? Why are they opening up the doors? And it's sometimes, especially under economic pressure, it's easy to slide that way. But then you think, but for that opportunity, would my mother have had a chance to come here? But for that opportunity, would my friend's dad be able to come here, or my friend's mom be able to come here? So you tend to slow down a little bit and say, no, this is Canada. This is actually what we do. We continue to build on the fabric of our nation. It's an imperfect fabric, and it's growing and changing all the time, but it is a fabric, and we need those threads to continue to build on it, and recognizing that those threads will be different from us, but we come together to accomplish a common thing.
Wow. Okay, where's my notes? Okay, back to my notes. Oh my Lord. Okay. On another note, we're keeping it positive. There's a conversation that has to be brought to the forefront. So there's discussions with British going to Jamaica, and some representation that they don't want to be part of the British Commonwealth. There's conversations like that. And also in America, I know we're talking about it in Canada, but this is something that we need to actually be concerned with. Like in Florida, the literature, they don't want Black history in there. Is that concerning to you when you look at the story of Richard Picart on why it has to be represented? We have to see ourselves. And I can honestly say that in literature, because when I was in school, it wasn't talked about much. I'm going to be honest with you. It wasn't. So if you can amplify that so well as you've been doing.
I actually feel ironic. This is going to be an ironic statement, so I'm trusting you and your audience will stay with me on this. I actually feel sorry for the people, the legislators, the decision makers who are trying to mute history.
Yes.
Trying to mute history is temporary in its design, because the people who make up the history still live. The stories continue to be told, and the stories get told faster, in much more complex and colorful ways. And because the ability to reconcile records, to go back in and look at an ancestry.com, or to go into history books, or hear oral stories, it's impossible to mute it. So you may remove something from a curriculum or take a book out of the library, but you can't stop the story from moving forward. And so it does come across, of course, as a frustration that it's not being included in formal learning environments. No question about that. But I also say that it is strengthening the will of the characters within the story, the generations that come from those stories, to tell the story, to do their DNA profile, to ask their parents where they came from, to write books, to do the work that it takes to document their story. And so that's what's going to happen. So I'll end where I started off. I feel slightly bad for the people who are trying to do this, because there's no way for them to accomplish their goal. They can't accomplish their goal. They can slow it down, but they can't stop it. And all that type of headspace cultivates is a willingness for people to rise to positions of influence, where they can then begin to change those situations to achieve different outcomes. And so, we be patient. It is a situation where we have to exercise patience. But anyone who has left a country to go to a place that they've never been to pursue something that they've never had understands patience. As immigrants, we understand patience. We understand long suffering. You're not going to outlast us. Our fortitude as immigrants of all backgrounds, not just Jamaican, our fortitude is unmeasured. And so one or two legislators deciding to not do something or do something is not going to stop us at all. It's just going to strengthen us. It's going to strengthen the diaspora and will allow us to increase the brilliancy of this fabric that we've been talking about called Canada.
Wow. Woo. Okay. Wow. Okay. Another one for you. Another one, my friend. Okay. Did you mention this in the last episode about when your mother kept a pink slip in a briefcase?
Yes. So there's a slight correction there. So
okay, all right.
I went into and I'll shorten the story in the interest of time. She has this suitcase that Robert and I were not allowed to go into. It was just understood as children we should not go in there. A few months ago, she had gotten sick, was hospitalized, and I was concerned that perhaps I should go into this suitcase just in case there was information that I needed to validate with her in the event that she, had a tragic end, that I would not be able to get information. So I was disobedient, I should say, in opening this suitcase to see what was in it to make sure that there wasn't anything there of importance that I would need to consult her on. In going into this suitcase, I found a yellow piece of paper. It wasn't pink, it was yellow. And no, not a problem. So it was a yellow piece of paper, and I started to read it. And in reading it, I noticed that it was written in Italian. And as I continued to try to make my way through it, I come to find out that it's the original boat ticket from Jamaica to England.
Wow.
In pristine condition. Wow. And it had her seat on there, her typical boat information, where she would stay, her quarters, and so forth. And I found it, emotionally moving. Of course, this is back in 1956 when she left Jamaica, and going to Plymouth, UK, stopping in Italy and so forth. It was for the steamship Irpinia, and she had all of this put together, folded nicely in this suitcase. And we're talking, 1956. So we're talking 60 years, 70 years ago. So it moved me because it served as a symbol of I came from somewhere. There was some sacrifice, there was some movement. This is the migration. It's not just a story. This is evidence, receipts, as the young folks would say today. I have a receipt of the fact that she was on the move, and not just her. So many thousands of people have a receipt like that says, I came from somewhere with my one or two suitcases, and I went somewhere that I didn't know. When she got to England, she didn't even have a coat. And this was in March in England.
And it's raining.
And it's raining and it's miserable. And so she didn't have a coat. Can you imagine landing in Toronto on January 1st with no coat? I mean, it's a jarring and not knowing anyone, and you're just there in pursuit of something that you have an idea about, but you don't know, and you're hoping that you can reach this rail that you can hold on to move your life forward. It's incredible. So it was moving to me. Of course, I shared it with Robert, and and I put it back. I folded it back and put it right back in the suitcase and closed it up and set it aside. But yeah, so it's again, it's all about telling our stories. And as you said in an earlier part of the question, taking books out of schools and kind of muting stories. That's the point I'm trying to make. You can't mute that. It's like catching rain. You can't do that. The story is going to tell itself. Right? We are an amplifier of the story, not the story in of itself. And so as this generation here continues to talk about it, we're amplifying what already is. Anyone who's removing books and muting these stories is trying to remove what is. You can't do that. Right? And so, I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned at all. And thank you for asking about that. You're very gracious to bring that part up. It's a very lovely part of her history.
It is, my love. And it's a pleasure. Okay, we only have a minute left.
Sure.
What's your words to our viewers and especially our youth, which is our future generation?
Absolutely. Well, first, let me thank you, Joy, and the team at Rogers, who have graciously hosted myself and Robert in getting the story out, and we're quite humbled by that. With regards to my last words to people, and I'll say specifically to youth, is tell our story. There's nobody coming behind you to tell your story. Sit down and talk with your grandparents, talk with your parents. Ask them open-ended questions like, what was it like when you came here back in the 60s? Was it difficult? Were you afraid? Ask them questions that give them an opportunity to transfer to you the knowledge. And when you receive that knowledge, be a good caretaker of it. Use your phone to document it. Write something down in your computer, and take up the responsibility of carrying that forward for the next generation. Prepare it in a way that they too can receive the gift that you'll receive, and we'll all be better for it. And then the last thing I will say, self-servingly, is go buy the Gotti book. It's going to be fantastic. Go buy Gotti. It's available anywhere that you buy books. You can go to the website, GODDIE book.com.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much.